Hey, this is Monique Allison, and you are listening to Surviving Survival Mode podcast series. And this is going to be centered around the shifts that I'm actually making as I'm emerging out of survival mode. So I'm going to be talking about the habits that I'm changing, practices that I'm doing, and also talking to other women as they share their personal story and their version of survival mode. I really hope that it resonates on a level that will empower and encourage others to make necessary changes in their lives so that we are not just surviving our circumstances, but we're doing things that's going to position us to really thrive. In the previous episode, I talked about emerging out of survival mode, but before I even got to that space of recognizing that I needed to shift out of it, I was dealing with a lot of negative emotions and negative self-talk. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you in this episode. When I was deep in the space of surviving day-to-day situations, along with that came a lot of negative emotions, negative self-talk. I was really hypersensitive, and it just triggered so many feelings on a regular basis for me that I just had to figure out a way to shift out of it. I dealt with feeling ashamed, and the self-talk that I was having when that feeling came up was, come on, like, you're an adult. You've been doing this. What's the problem? Why are you struggling now? I was feeling a lot of anxiety because I didn't always have the resources to resolve the problem that I was faced with. Where am I going to get the funds to pay for my son's tuition? Where am I going to get the money to pay for this bill and that bill? And they're all due at the same time, but I'm only getting paid this amount of money. And mentally trying to process that, I would literally just start physically feeling the anxiety around that. I also felt embarrassed just about the overall situation that I was in. There was a lot of guilt that I dealt with. I felt self-pity. I was judging myself. I had moments of feeling really incompetent because I'm like, you should be able to do this without an issue, without any challenges. There's moments where I just felt hopeless because I didn't see a way out of a lot of situations. Even though there was, I just couldn't see it. And I also was feeling like I wasn't adding value. Outside of me adding value to my son, that felt like the only person that I could add value to. I wasn't able to see where I can add value to other communities that I was a part of. And all of those feelings happening day in, day out would put me in a state of depression. Having all of those feelings all of the time for a long period of time left no room to feel motivated outside of the things that I had to deal with. The emotions were flooding me all of the time. Yet, I still had to keep on living. I still had to persist. I had to survive. But I only had just enough energy to keep my head above water. And that was a struggle. And you've probably heard this saying or something similar to it, to where, there's a time for holding things together and then there's a time for falling apart. And what's crazy is I was fighting to hold things together, but I really just wanted to fall apart. I really wanted to crawl under a rock and just not deal. And that wasn't an option for me. I had to survive the day. I had to survive the situation. I had to move through the feeling that I was dealing with. It was no room to fall apart. And I would always say to myself, when I did have to really show up in other spaces, I would say, I clean up pretty well. But that was externally, but internally, I really just wanted to fall apart. Even though the things that I had to get through and some of the things that I'm still processing are normal things that happen in life, the intensity in which some of the things happen and the time frame in which they happened when they were back to back to back, I just felt like this is not normal. I was resisting the space that I was in. I couldn't recognize it as an opportunity to step back, re-strategize, regroup, and say, okay, let me just take a breather and kind of figure out, what do I need to do differently? What do I need to do next? I was really resisting it, and it just felt really crazy. But survival mode is real, and it's hard, but it's a very human thing that happens to a lot of us. And once I was able to accept this space that I was in and really just own it, not to stay stuck in it, but just acknowledge and recognize that's where I'm at, It was like, so what's next? Are you going to stay stuck? What do you need to do to create certainty, sustainability? What do I need to do next? What do I need to do to start positioning myself so I can thrive? And that's been the question moving forward to myself. There was also this internal dialogue of not enough. I didn't have enough time to do some of the things that I needed to do. I didn't have enough resources to resolve issues. I didn't have enough money to cover all of the bills. I didn't have enough energy to deal with a lot of the extras. I didn't have enough emotional and mental capacity to hold it all together all of the time. I felt like I wasn't even doing enough to change my situation. But that's the thing though. Like, survival mode is when all you can do is just enough, and having to be okay with that. Like, surviving the day is like the big goal, and that's it. Not surviving the week, but surviving the day. That's a goal, and that had to be enough without judgment. Like, changing that perspective around the whole enough thing is what I had to do. Like, I had to change my expectations. I had to simplify things. Like, don't put too many expectations on myself, because it's going to be counterproductive, because when I can't meet those expectations, I'm going to feel bad about myself, and it's just going to spiral me back into negative self-talk and negative feelings. So that was one of the things that I had to shift mentally, was saying to myself, like, it's just going to have to be enough, because that's all that I have the capacity to do for today.
What we do here is go back.
I have a thirst for understanding my life, the things that I do, and everything that happens to me, whether it's good or bad. Because at the end of the day, understand that it's going to come back to me and how I respond versus how I react to what's happening. So that's why I love journaling. When I journal, it allows me to reflect, to analyze, to process things that's happening. And when I'm in the moment, vulnerable, honest, and I'm expressing my thoughts, my feelings, my interpretation of what's happening. And I also go back and reread my journal entries. And when I do that, I gain a different insight about the experience, and it allows me to just really have understanding. And because of that, I become more wiser and emotionally mature to deal with obstacles and difficulties that I'm faced with moving forward. And so it's important to reflect. So the insight that I gained from coming out of this experience and journaling about it was I lacked self-compassion and self-acceptance. I was really hard on myself. It was very challenging for me to be like, this is okay, Monique. It is okay. It's not just happening to you. This is life. I couldn't find the language and the words, and it just wasn't there. I was beating myself up every day, and that contributed to me staying stuck and me having all of these negative feelings and being depressed. And so when I went back and reflected on the words that I was saying to myself internally, it was really negative. And I understand that we have to feel what we feel. It's just, for me, I want to be able to find that balance to say, okay, and now what? And get to that space sooner than later. And you can't really put a time frame on it, but for me, and knowing and understanding how I am, I will spiral. And so I know that I need to be able to express what's happening, feel my feelings, and then figure out what's the lesson in it, and then work through it and keep it moving. All right, that's the end of episode 2. Thank you so much for listening to Surviving Survival Mode podcast series.